and I'm here to talk to you about the financial crisis that's going on and an alternative idea that might sound pretty radical, but I think it's worth considering, so I thought I'd document it. To do that, I've put together some tools. I got a little timer here that keeps me on track here. I'm going to do this as a YouTube video, which means I'm limited to about 10 minutes. So this little timer I'm going to park off the side. If you go bing, that means I'm out of time, and I'll fold things up and might have to do another video, but we'll see how far I get. Some other tools I have here that I'm going to use, you'll see popping up, a little calculator, and in fact, I'll be watching you, so don't do anything funny. Okay, so let's get started. Again, I call this Back to the Future, and by that I mean saving $700 billion, which I don't believe is going to work, and to do so, rolling back what's called mark-to-market asset valuation. I've written about this on my website, and I've done some more research, and I discovered the best way to think about it is through a graphical interface. So I'm doing this as a presentation. I'm going to do it as a YouTube video, and hopefully those of you who are watching will get the idea and maybe comment on it. This is me. I'm actually now an author of a book called Deadly Freedom, which is what I'd really like to be talking about. Deadly Freedom is about solving our energy problem, which I believe is actually bigger than this problem. Why do I say it's bigger? Well, we spend $700 billion a year on this problem, and by that I mean we're sending it to countries that don't like us to import their oil. So in my book, I come up with a scheme to actually do what I call a carbonless electric economy, which means we're generating electricity out in the desert where we have enough capacity for 15 to 20 countries our size, and we move to electric vehicles, which are now coming up to speed, literally, given the nature of battery technology today. Unfortunately, I can't talk about this today because there's something more pressing, and that is our financial crisis. So we need to get past the short term to get to the long term. So I thought I'd spend some time on what the short term might be. So solving the financial crisis, I needed to think about how money flows in a bank. So how do we get into this mess? Another issue I want to talk about. There's two schemes that have been proposed, bailout schemes. One is to buy mortgage-backed securities. The other is to invest in new banks, and even one I've heard of is to start a new bank, which I might talk about in a bit. The option I want to zero in on at the end is what I call the unwind option, and that's where I get the Back to the Future. Why it will work, and why there are going to be those who don't want it to work, and look a bit about that. So here we go. To do this, I needed to get back into accounting, and so don't go white knuckle on me. This is pretty basic accounting. We're just going to do balance sheets here, because when you think about how banks operate, you really need a model for understanding what's going on, and the best way I could think of it was do it graphically. So just as a review, this is a balance sheet for a bank, but it could be a balance sheet for anybody else. And of course we have assets, liabilities, and equity, where of course equity is always assets minus the liabilities. And in a bank, what we're going to do is zero in on some of the assets that are in the news these days, and that's mortgage-backed securities, which are really just a bundle of mortgages, thousands of them. I've got 1,000 in this one, but I mean you could have many thousands of them in one security. And let's say the average is $100,000, and so if you had 1,000, you have a $100 million asset here. If you put 10 of these together, you have a 1 billion asset, and if you put 50 of them, you have a $5 billion asset. So these are kind of the building blocks we're going to start putting into these banks. And also, some other building blocks are loans. So we need both loans to people, and these oranges are loans from people of different sizes. And of course, we need some cash. So if we go to the next page, I've built myself 3 banks here, and they're all the same, just to keep things interesting. So I've loaded them up with assets totaling, if you add these up, it's $12 billion of assets. liabilities, I've given them $8 billion, which means they have equity of $4 billion. And they're all three of them the same. And again, that's just to keep it simple. I want to watch the flows of money in the system. So let's see what happens before all this, what hit the fan. Well, in the old days, the sane days, banks did a lot of loaning to each other. So here's Bank A, we've got a Bank B, and a Bank C. And Bank A has a loan from Bank B of $2 billion. Bank B is also loaning Bank C $2 billion. And Bank C is loaning Bank A $2 billion. And Bank A is also loaning money out, and it could have loans to other banks. And we're just trying to keep it simpler with three banks. But they're also loaning to businesses, which is ultimately what we want to do. Right? We want to get money out into the marketplace so people can do something useful with it and get it out of the banks. And so this is the way things work. And so when this loan comes due, what used to happen is this guy would say, you know what, I want another loan because I've got, and these are short-term loans. Many are worth 90-day loans, a week loan, whatever they were. They're relatively short-term. And as this one came due, he would simply say, he's paying his interest on here, so he'd simply say, okay, I need another loan. And Bank B would say, yeah, you're good for it. You got a good record. I'm going to give you another loan. And so money just flows through the system this way. Well, all was well and good for a while. Then we have to ask what happened. And the what happened is interesting because we have to go back in time and do some history here. And I trace it back to, believe it or not, Enron. Enron was this company, an energy company that went terribly bad by misusing the regulations in terms of how they valued assets. And of course, a lot of the principals of that company are now in jail, where they should be. I mean, they were literally really bad people. So what happened as an outgrowth of that is something called the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. I should have said Act here. Came along, and that was intended to legislate morality, to combat anyone else from doing what Enron had done, to prevent it. And along with that came some different valuation rules called mark-to-market. Okay, and I'll talk more about that. But technically, it's the Financial Accounting Board's called FAS Rule 157. Okay, and that's the mark-to-market rule. And basically what mark-to-market says is you have to take all your assets and mark them to what you would get for them if you sold them today, even if you had no intention of selling them. Well, mark-to-market works well for liquid assets like stocks and bonds, where you could go to Yahoo or wherever you get your financial information, and you could look up, for example, the value of Apple stock, and there are millions of shares traded every day, and you would know exactly how much a share of Apple stock is worth. Unfortunately, with a mortgage-backed security, these things are fairly illiquid. Really, there's only banks that deal with them because you need the infrastructure to process loans, and they're very large in value. So there are times when there is no market, and in fact, as things progress, as we got a few bad loans into the system, it drove the value of these mortgage-backed securities to zero in some cases. And that's because in some cases there were no mortgage-backed securities being traded, therefore you had to mark them to zero. So basically what FAS 157 is the SEC's negative amplifier with what I call regenerative feedback. And here's a good example of that. And everyone has seen this example. You start out with a microphone, and you run that through an amplifier. And if you've been to a party or a wedding or something, you'll see the DJ has this stuff. And he's got a big honking speaker here, a set of speakers. And what an amplifier does is take a small signal and make a large model of that. It amplifies that. What happens here, and you've heard this, you haven't seen it, but you've certainly heard this, if this speaker is too close to the microphone or the volume is too high, this feedback comes back into the microphone and generates a bigger signal, and that gets amplified, and then you hear the loud squelch. Okay, so that's a negative regenerative feedback, and in fact that is what happened with the mark-to-market valuation rules. Okay, I'm watching my egg timer here, and it looks like I'm about to run out of time. So what I'm going to do is stop this video, and I will start up with another one. See you then.